When were you born?
What?
When were you born?
When was I born? I was born on May 12, 1924. At a very early age. Before I was 1 year old.
Okay.
What else do you want to know?
Where were you born?
What?
Where were you born?
I was born in Moon Run, Pennsylvania. That's outside of Pittsburgh, a coal mining town. I came to Cleveland when I was about 2 years old. Next.
What did your dad do?
What?
What did your dad do?
My dad worked at Apex Electric in Cleveland and worked all the way through Depression.
What did he do before that?
What's that?
What did he do before that?
He was a coal miner. But he worked all during the Depression, and we always had another family living with us because otherwise they'd be out on the street. They were out of a job and they needed a place to live, and we just squeezed them in with our family.
What did you do on the house calls?
Well, I checked our blood pressure, I listened to our heart and lungs. I listened to their problems. A lot of times I had cancer patients that were dying, so I helped the family with the death and dying issues. A patient doesn't even have to go to the hospital, because if they're so close to dying, there's no need to go to the hospital. It's better for them to stay with their family. But house calls were always, well, they're very enjoyable at times. This one lady had no curtains on her window, and the curtains were all folded up on the table. She had them cleaned, and she's an old lady, about 90 years old. She says, "Oh, I wish I could put those curtains up." I says, "Well, I'll put them up." She says, "Oh, no, no, I don't want you to," and she's bringing the stepladder over. So I put her curtains up. Another one wanted me to make house calls always on a Thursday, because she was so feeble she couldn't take her garbage out. So as I was leaving, she says, "Put this garbage on the curb." So there were a lot of things in the house call that weren't medical, but they were satisfying to the people. I made house calls 24 hours a day. I hated the ones at 3 o'clock in the morning, because I always felt a special chill at 3 o'clock in the morning, but I made those house calls anyway. And
how many did you make?
What?
How many did you make?
Well, the first year I was in, this 1 month, I made about 300 house calls. I was so tired. I nearly fallen asleep at the steering wheel on Warren Road when I was heading towards a parked car, and I woke up in time to drive around it. Boy, that was bad.
What was it like in Korea?
In Korea, the day the war ended. I didn't see any war at all, but I saw a lot of casualties from landmines where the legs blown off and things like that. People were extremely poor. They were chased off North Korea with nothing. What was amazing, even though he had nothing, they were able to build a house out of mud. They built the walls up and found enough of scrap metal to make a roof. And they had the floor about 18 inches off the ground. And the stove was on the outside, on one side of the hut. And the chimney would go underneath the floor, and at the chimney on the opposite side, and it would heat up the floor. So even in the coldest winter day, they were kept warm because they slept on the floor anyway. And of course, you had to take your shoes off when you came into a Korean home. And when I made house calls to some of the Koreans, they called me and I made house calls to their house. And I was trying to take my shoes off and they said, "Oh no, no, you don't need to take your shoes off." I took it off anyway because I didn't want to impose on them in any way. But I had this one woman who husband worked in our motor pool, and we had a lot of flammable liquids to degrease engines and degrease parts, and the flammable liquid was still good for burning, so he was allowed to take some of the flammable liquid with oil in it to his home, and his wife tried to start a fire real fast to get it going, and she threw the flammable liquid onto the fire and it blew back on her, so she burned her front part of her body except the breast, because she had a binder like a lot of women, and she just had a baby that was about a couple of months old. And my medical detachment sterilized sheets for her so that she could lay on the floor and put a sterile sheet over her, and we kept doing that. Well, I told her to go to Italian Red Cross Hospital, but she said she couldn't because she had to feed the baby. You know, it's really a sad thing to see things like that. And
how did you lose your pants?
year before I was the campaign manager for this girl to become council president, and I thought at least half the girls would vote for her, but she lost terribly. The guy won. Well, the next year well, she didn't run the next year, so I just joined the guy that beat her the next year. But I didn't really lose my pants, but that was my campaign issue. That was right after World War II. They had penicillin, they had streptomycin. Those are two main drugs that they had. So when we had pneumonia, in the old days before penicillin and streptomycin, we had to get a sputum and check the sputum for what kind of pneumococcus they had. and there were, I think, 6 different types of pneumococcus, and we had to give them the right antibody for the pneumococcus they had. Well, when antibiotics came out, that we didn't have to do that anymore. We just gave them penicillin and streptomycin. The other interesting thing was when we gave them penicillin and streptomycin, some people's pneumonia on x-ray didn't improve. We found the reason they didn't improve was they had a cancer of the lung. They had it before too, but they died before before anyone knew about it. But we found a lot more cancer of the lung when the antibiotics came. And I was interested in lung in general, so that's why I got into the lung business.
Why did you retire?
Well, I retired from the hospital in 1989, I think it was. And I started Mobile Medical, where the hospital was interested in me making house calls to the shut-ins, the Medicare shut-ins, who couldn't get to see the doctor or go to the hospital. And I started that program. And I did that for about 10 years until about 1999, when I was having trouble with my heart, and I had so much trouble sleeping because of my heart, that this one time I was driving back to the hospital, and I fell asleep at the wheel when I came to a stoplight and rolled slowly into the next car ahead of me. When that happened, I says, that's it. I gotta retire. But it was my heart that made me retire. I had my bypass in 1981 and 1993. Had pacemaker put in 1999. And year 2000 I had stents put into my vessels, and I'm still here 30 years after my first bypass, 31 years after my first bypass. I've never had a patient live that long after a bypass.
That must be why you keep saying you don't expect to live till next year.
What's that?
That must be why you keep saying I don't expect to live till next year.
Right, exactly.
How does it feel to be a grandfather?
It's great to be a grandfather. Seeing my grandsons growing up, especially my youngest one. Sort of a troublemaker, but
Yeah.
but I'm proud of him.
What about my brothers?
Well, I'm proud of your brothers too. Your brother Pete, who is studying mathematics, and he's doing very well. He was inducted into a math club, a national math club, and he wants to continue mathematics at some prestigious college like MIT or something like that, to go beyond his a bachelor's degree. And boy, he shows me some of his math problems that he's worked on. And he worked on a math paper. I'm still trying to figure it out. I had a lot of math before I went to medical school. But boy, oh boy, not that much. Not as much as he had. It's amazing.
What about James?
What?
What about James?
James has problems. He always had some kind of problem. And I hope he works them out. He went back to stay with his mother, and she has problems. Anything else?
No.